talking to you. Stop agreeing with everything I say and do. I don't need an echo, I don't need a shadow, I don't need a copy. Can you just stop talking? Just stop talking. Challenge me, please. Give me something to work with. Not talking is worth it. Challenge me, please. Give me something to work with.
Too long didn't watch this one is don't buy this mouse. It's retailing for about $130 at retail. That is definitely way too much. It is retailing for $80 at a kind of reduced price. That's also pretty expensive. And overall, the reasons I have are here, and I'll explain more about that in the later sections. But basically, it's doing the bare minimum that a mouse like this should be doing at this time. Right when it came out, it was really good, but now it's not so good. There's other options out there reduced $80 price that are more worth it. It's definitely not worth it at that full retail price. And the full potential of this is not really unlocked until you buy a $100 power play mat, which allows you to do infinite wireless charging and all that. So ultimately, I wouldn't recommend this mouse. If you're looking for alternatives, I have some in the timestamp where we talk about alternatives. They're also linked in the description below. So, yeah. All right, let's talk about why I don't recommend this mouse. A couple of things here I just kind of put on the screen so I can just kind of talk through them. First thing, when this mouse came out, I think it was in 2017 or so, it was obviously pretty popular, and part of the reason was because of things like the ambidextrous design, the kind of symmetrical two-button on other side layout, the fact that it had that really good hero sensor, the fact that you could attach it to a playmat, and it would basically never run out of charge. There's also the fact that it had that wireless light speed technology, which basically allowed you to have very low latency times, which was one of the big things between a wireless mouse and a wired mouse, was that the wired was always gonna have better latency, and so they had a technology that basically with that dongle was able to give you that similar latency speeds and really good. And so those were kind of the main things that kind of propelled the mouse there to kind of a status that people really cared about. The issue that I have with that is, well, it was great in 2018. A bunch of mice have come out that are kind of doing the things that this mouse did. All mice now have that light speed technology in terms of being able to have good latency. So the latency isn't really an advantage. The lightweightness of the mouse isn't really an advantage because other mouse have come out that are both ambidextrous and lightweight. Even from Logitech, right? The 703 is ambidextrous and relatively lightweight. A bunch of Razer mice, the Viper Ultimate, and Viper V2, the Basilisk Hyperspeed, right, is also pretty lightweight and not ambidextrous, but in that lightweight category. And then you obviously have things like the honeycomb mice. So overall, the things that this mice does that were maybe very good are kind of mellowed out to basically being the bare minimum of what you'd expect. More critically for this price. So the other thing is that the options you get at this price aren't really, this mouse aren't really competitive anymore. So we go to Camel real quick, and I check the price of this mouse. So I got this mouse for $80 right here. This kind of line. If I do 1 year, it shows 80, yeah, 80, which was about this time, right? The November, December, January time. And there's sometimes where it's, a little bit less, but this is pretty rare. Most of the time, it's sitting up in this area, this, 100, 120, retail price of $130. For this price, you can get a G703, you can get a Viper Ultimate, older models, the Viper Ultimate Wireless. You can get Steel Series, whatever their version of that is. You can get Basilisk X Hyperspeed. There's a bunch of other options that you can get for this price point here. That overall are better in a lot of ways, and just in terms of quality, generally speaking, right? So while this is still a good mouse, there's other options now at that price point. The other thing is that it's also definitely not worth it at the $130 retail, even when it released. These mice magically being the wired versions 70 or 80, and the wireless being 150 is this ridiculous trend that Logitech started and everyone kind of perpetuates, but it's definitely not worth $130 at retail. There's just not enough here to really justify that. This still comes with a typical cable, micro cable that you have to kind of plug in and stuff, compared to other mice like the Razer, which I paid $150 for, and it came with the mouse and this wireless charging thing that was generally speaking better, right? And I was able to get it in a bundle with a mouse pad, the Razer Goliath, which was an extra $40 that I didn't have to pay because I got it in the bundle, and so all that kind of made it worth it for me when I got my Razer mouse, right? So ultimately, yeah, it's the bare minimum for what we consider now to be a premium mouse. There's other options at that reduced $80 price. It's not worth at the full retail $130 as we talked about. And more importantly, the full potential of this mouse with the wireless charging puck only is accessible with you have that $100 mat, the PowerPlay mat. Now I bought the PowerPlay mat. It looks like this. It was introduced in 2017, and it wirelessly charges a bunch of mice. It can charge the 703, the 502, the G Pro and Superlight and all that. The problem is that this mousepad released in 2017 for $100, and I was like, okay, that's really expensive, right? Especially in 2017 and all that. It doesn't make a ton of sense. I bought it because as inflation becomes worse and worse, this thing hasn't changed its price. It probably should have gone down, but it didn't. So I was able to get it for around $100, average retail, and I like it because of sort of its ability to do this thing, and also the fact that it made the mouse worth it. Like, I would not have changed from my Razer mouse if I didn't get the mouse pad to make this thing happen, right? Because one of the things that was kind of a problem with my Razer was the rubber on it kind of starting to deteriorate, and also the battery life, slowly going down. And I didn't have to worry about that with this power play, and that's kind of why I decided to do this combo. The combo ended up being like $180, right? Because it was that mouse pad that was $100. There was a bundle, but it didn't discount the mouse pad, and then the $80 mouse, which was technically on sale, and you can check from Camel that it is on sale at that price, but it's not really worth it, beyond that price. And so overall, the reason I don't recommend this is because of the reasons here. You can get better things for it, and the real potential doesn't really unlock until you get to that $100 mat. So basically, as you can see from ratings, which is typically what I use for doing this more analytical stuff, because they have really good rating for systems and things. They recommended the mouse has an 8.5, but they said that basically some complaints was that it wasn't great for smaller hands, and they didn't have Bluetooth support. Now, the one thing I noticed pretty immediately was the recommended options. They're all basically Logitech, except for the one Razer Viper. So what I would recommend, if you were looking for a mouse similar to this, but that is not this, is to get something like a Razer Viper Ultimate, or a Razer Basilisk X Hyperspeed, or a G703. These three are really a good comparison, because they're all pretty similar. The Basilisk X Hyperspeed is a little bit of a different mouse, similar like a G502, but it is pretty lightweight and pretty cheap. So if you're looking for this price point, but something that is better in terms of these quality features, then I think that's really a good option, right? The Ultimate, if we check on Amazon, is very expensive, right? Because it comes with that dock, and they're not really being sold anymore in this configuration, and so it's going to be pretty high up. But if I check Camel for the Viper Ultimate, it's not going to be as expensive. So if I just check this combo in the white, it has gone down to $70 on average of like $85. So it's definitely way below the black one. I got the black one because it was around the time that that was pretty popular, and I was able to get it for I said like $160, but include the mouse pad, right? So that was a pretty good deal at the time. I saw that eventually go down to like $130 for the bundle. And then eventually when they moved over to the new one, they don't sell it anymore, but they do sell the white one, and that's, as you can see, why it gets down to something like $85. So you get, both of those things, and overall I'd say the Razer was more comfortable and had better latency than this one, right? It was just more comfortable in my hand. The rubber felt nice, the contours felt better, just to me. Obviously that's going to depend, but to me the comfort and the connectivity was better on the Razer, and so that's why I originally bought that over this one, because they were out at the same time. Like the Razer was supposed to be kind of a successor to it. That's why I bought it. I ended up switching over because of the power play mat, which again, not everyone can do, because not everyone wants to spend that extra $100 on it. So I definitely recommend the Razer, the G703 as well. I think that's a pretty good one. It's a lower end one, but it's still pretty good. It still has that kind of the contoured shape. It still has the hero sensor that everyone wants. But overall, I think for that price of $71, it's a better longer term value, right? And as you can see, it gets to like 60 at times. So yeah, overall, those two, and then the Basilisk X Hyperspeed. Let's see if that pops up. Yeah, this So in the bachelor's hyperspeed, I originally had this mouse as well. It's pretty similar to like a G502, but it's only about $50. They're not selling this model anymore, but it's about $50 if you buy it on the market there. It got down to about 27, so that was pretty good. It averages around 44. In this case, it's the used market. It never retailed for 80, except maybe during the shortages or like the restocks, right? People were kind of trying to run out of inventory and trying to sell them for as quickly as possible, but ultimately this mouse was also really good at that price point. Comparatively, right? Still had the good sensor. It still had the connectivity you wanted. This one ran on a battery, so you didn't have to worry about charging it, which is really nice. So overall, these things just kind of show you that, yes, over time, mice have gotten better, and you don't need to rely on something like the G Pro here if you want more of these premium features. You can, not have to deal with that, right? So I think that's pretty good. And those are kind of the 3 mice I would, generally speaking, recommend at this price. So I did a test. My first latency test here. And this was a test basically just going through, and it's not super accurate, but it was basically just, hey, move your mouse across this line here, and it will determine your latency. So I did that, and like with a bunch of them, I got about 6.94. And I was like, okay, I went from there. You basically just go through the line consistency, and it will give you a rating, and it will give you a delta, and that's kind of like your latency amount. 6.94. I did it slower as well, and I got like 8.23. It got up to like 9.95 there, and overall I thought that, okay, that's pretty good. That must be what I kind of got on the Razer, because they were pretty similar, right? They're relatively the same technology. I was like, okay, the wireless is going to be pretty comparable. I was not right. The wireless was not comparable, and this confirms it. If I go down to the click latency, you'll see something pretty important. The expected connection rate is 6.9. That's about what I got, right? The wired is 3.8. That's a pretty big difference between a 6.9 and 3.8 wired versus wireless. Now, it's not something you're necessarily going to feel, but it is surprising when you compare it to the other option, which was the Razer Viper Ultimate. So this one got a much different click latency. If the other one got a click latency of, what was it, like 8 point something? Yeah, click latency of like 8.2. This one got a 9.3. And you can see here, the expected connection is a 2.9 millisecond response, with a wired being a 2.8, and the receiver, which is the dongle, being a 2.9. That's a pretty big jump, right? That's over double speed difference, and it's exactly the same as what you get wired. So Razer had a better hyperspeed technology than Logitech did, and while it might not be, super, affecting things, one of the main selling points is that hero sensor. And if it's worse than the Razer one, that's kind of an odd thing. It's also, again, more of a comfort thing. In this close-up shot, you can see that it has this kind of like textured plastic feeling that to me felt pretty good. But the rubber here, even if it kind of degrades over time, also felt really good. The plastic on here is kind of like a hard shell. It's not cheap feeling, but it definitely doesn't. It's kind of made to contour anything in any hand. And so I overall like the Razer one better, because it just feels like the best way I can describe it is it has the same hand feel as this, except instead of your thumb just pressing against hard plastic that doesn't move, the rubber is like literally conforming to it. So you actually feel like you're resting your thumb on the side here instead of it bulging out. Like this one kind of has a, let's see, like see this, you can see a good thing here on the feet. See how it like bulges out slightly, but it doesn't actually curve? See how this one curves much more? It's so that you can put your hand on it, and then as your thumb, which would typically in a lot of positions curve inward, right? Your thumb isn't perfectly straight, it's going to curve. The Razer curves with it. Like, if you think of like your spine, it's like straight up versus like, bent a little bit. This one curves really well to your hand. So you can kind of lay it there with the rubber, and it feels really good. And on both sides as well, right? It's pretty symmetrical, and it kind of, I guess, pillows both sides. The Logitech one doesn't do that, right? It has this kind of weird thing where this like corner part's going to hit the middle part of your thumb, and that's just going to rest on this plastic. Same thing with the other side. And so that ultimately makes this mouse not as comfortable as the Razer here. Now, a number of you might be asking, why did I buy this mouse if I ultimately didn't recommend it? And that reason is because I came from a Razer Viper Ultimate, and I liked that mouse, and I thought it was better and all that, and it was supposed to be a kind of like usurper to this mouse that I have right now. But the reason I ended up going with this mouse is because I was able to get the power play mat here that basically infinitely charges the mouse. And as ultimately it was really expensive, right? I do think it's worth it. And ultimately the reason I stuck with this mouse is because it is a side grade to my Razer Robo Ultimate, but it has this wireless charging thing. I decided that was enough for me to basically say, okay, I'm going to be using this, and the downsides of the mouse in terms of cost and in terms of kind of some comfort and latency things ultimately don't affect me too much if I can make the most out of this system. Now, obviously, not a lot of people are going to be able to do that because the mouse is like 80 on a good day, and the mouse pad hasn't moved from that $100. So you're going to be paying a lot of money for this system, and for most people, that's not going to be worth it. But for me, it made sense. I'm like, okay, one of the main problems I had with my Razer was the battery life was starting to die off. Right now, obviously, it's hard to tell because I had the Razer for 3 years, I think, and I just got this a couple months back. But battery life is holding up great. I don't have to charge it very often. What I mean by that is, like, right now I do because I'm at my dorm and I don't have that mouse pad. I'm using the old Razer one. But when I'm able to go out of this and get my own place and stuff, I will have and be using that system. And so I'm able to kind of, use that and have a good time. But ultimately, the reason I bought it was because of that. I wouldn't have bought this mouse if I couldn't have put, the power play mat to use. Basically. Very important part of the experience of this is definitely the software. So let's open that up. It's called G-Hub. You have to install this if you want a bunch of the options on the mouse, which is unfortunate, but at least it's lighter weight than something like a Razer Synapse or something like that, right? So you open this up and you'll see a couple things. You'll see a thing on the side that basically shows you like home, game and apps, community, resources, basically useless, right? You then have a desktop. This is basically your configuration. So mine, I just set on desktop. You can also configure it for any game you have and just switch if you want there. And then you have your devices. Now in this case, it shows my mouse, and it has things like battery, connectivity, and all that. And then in this case, it also shows my microphone because that's being currently plugged in. So I can click on this one, and because I'm using the onboard memory, which means you don't need to be connected to the app in order to use the mouse, it will show me this, which basically just shows me the battery life, some basic settings, and what onboard memory profile I'm using. And at the bottom, it will tell you, hey, we're using onboard memory. If you want to be able to control stuff in software, disable that. So I click that, and that basically disables the onboard memory. I have a little notification here that basically says, hey, we've set manually the DPI. And now on this section, I have things like being able to disable and enable the buttons I'm using, and being able to activate low battery mode. If I go back and I go back into it, I'll get a different screen. This screen basically lets me change things like sensitivity, anywhere from 400 to 6400 to 20,000, 25,000. And I'm able to click these buttons and set them, and basically holding down a shift button to quickly shift between them, which we'll talk about in a second, and obviously select polling rate. I then can do the assignments. This is pretty similar to other mouse assignment things, right? You can change what the buttons are doing. In this case, I just have forward, which I never use because it's too far away from where my hands are to actually use that. I do have middle click on this button at the bottom here. That's mainly just because I'm more used to clicking middle click and scrolling down web pages, or using it for games in that way. And then copy and paste, I also barely use just because my hand doesn't usually naturally fall on those buttons because they're a little bit lower than I expect them to be. So, and then G shift is literally just battery level. So, but you can also change everything. These are kind of just like, hey, here's how everything's organized. You can search for a command, and then you just kind of like drag it into where you want. So if I want to, change the copy to something like, save, Control S, I could just drag it over there and it will select that, right? And then we have lighting. This is just, syncing lighting for games and everything like that, and that's enabled through Windows settings. Nothing too important there. In this case, for me, I'm going to enable onboard memory again. It says, hey, you're going to enable onboard memory. I hit got it, and now if I go back into it, we get this menu. I like this just because I don't have to, worry about profiles changing or messing up if I, for example, switch computers, right? Because it's all now being controlled there. And so it's pretty simple. You can, see that. When it's charging, it'll change this to this kind of connection USB and charging. You can also use it while it's charging, and it'll show you there. But overall, software is pretty simple to use, pretty easy, pretty lightweight, which I like. It's not, constantly updating in the background like the Razer one did. So overall, software is a good thing, I would say, generally. In conclusion, ultimately, while I do think that there's a lot of merit to this mouse and its experience and what it was able to do for the mouse gaming mouse industry in general, I don't think it's good to buy it now, especially for the 130 retail price or even the 80 reduced price, because I ultimately think there are better mice out there that I recommended in the description and in the alternative section that I think are going to be better and more enjoyable as a mouse than this mouse does. That's not mean that you can't buy this mouse or enjoy it or all that. It is a ultimately great mouse. It's just in the current landscape, there's a lot of better options out there. And I think that if you're not looking at this and you're just looking at this mouse because it has Logitech on it and all the pros are using it and all that, you're going to be not disappointed, but you're definitely not going to get the experience I'd expect at this point, right? There's other mice that are doing things like this for cheaper or doing things like this more expensive, but have something about them that really makes them stand out, right? I don't think this is one of these cases because of just kind of the context around it. Even something like the newer super light models don't really have that going for them, right? There's kind of a reason that the super light models, while popular, are not the immediate default 2-factor. It's just kind of because they haven't changed a ton, right? I'm not saying it necessarily needs to, but they need to do something, right? They can't just stay where they are here. And I think that's kind of the ultimate downfall of this product here is you can still buy it and you can still buy this original model, and they haven't really done much with this model since then. You know, they've made it lighter, sure, but I really don't think that's necessarily worth, you know, what they charge. I'm pretty sure the Super Light X2 is still like $130, $140, which is just, you know, ridiculous at this point. So yeah, I'm not gonna say it's a bad mouse. It's definitely a good mouse. You can definitely enjoy it, but ultimately I think that you'd be happier with something else.